Suddenly it came over me that everything would go wrong. It sounds crazy, Keys, but it's true, so help me. I couldn't hear my own footsteps. It was the walk of a dead man.
Welcome, dames, gents, palookas, and street toughs to the inaugural installment in a brand new ongoing series of video essays examining the rudiments of one of America's most enduring cultural exports, curiously with a name coined by the French. I speak, of course, of the steam-drenched backlighting bonanza that is film noir. The purpose of this series is multifarious, to simultaneously highlight some of the finest exemplars the genre has to offer, explain why the genre is a quintessential facet of the American identity and thus must at all costs never be forgotten and allowed to pass into pastiche, while hopefully dismantling the many myths and misconceptions that have led leering armchair cinemaphiles and perma-failures at film school to dub run-of-the-mill sci-fi like Blade Runner 2049 as future noir, despite sharing exactly none of its defining traits. The original Blade Runner, now that's another story, but one for another day.
People confuse crime stories and noir. I find crime stories tend to be very literal, often quite boring, generally rather ugly to look at. Whereas noir is gorgeous, it's all style, but it's the emotional realism is what you're after. It's not that you're divorcing yourself from reality, it's just you're saying reality is my clay.
It's a righteous, generically American film movement and exposited one great theme, and that theme is you are inches away from the greatest sex of your life, but within 6 weeks of meeting the woman, you will be framed for a crime you did not commit, and you will end up in the gas chamber. And as they strap you in and you're about to breathe the cyanide fumes, you'll be grateful for the few weeks you had with her and grateful for your own death.
The sobering fact is, there may be no more routinely exploited, name-checked, or habitually mislabeled genre in modern moviedom than film noir. Fast forward to 2017, and even the new season of hacktivist drama Mr. Robot is being hailed as a modern noir masterpiece. I mean, if that's the case, what in the lowest chambers of hell isn't? Noir is more than rainswept alleyways, smoking fedoras, folks. And while film critics rightly assert that it's as much a feeling as a filmic discipline, it's also a hell of a lot more than mere mood. Take today's entry in the cavernous vault of the Film Noirchives, Double Indemnity. If you adhere to the rather shallow Guillermo del Toro distinction of what comprises noir, detective, saxophone, smoking, and silhouettes, it fails hard on every front. But find me a more influential example of all things noir than Double Indemnity, and you'll likely return empty-handed.
Yes, I killed him. I killed him for money. And for a woman. And I didn't get the money, and I didn't get the woman. Pretty, isn't it?
Double Indemnity's protagonist is neither a detective nor a particularly decent human being, which summarily strips the otherwise straight-ahead femme fatale Mrs. Dietrichson of some of her genre bona fides outright.
I've been trying to contact your husband for the past 2 weeks, but he's never in his office.
Is there anything I can do?
The insurance ran out on the 15th. I'd hate to think of you having a smashed fender or something while you're not fully covered.
Perhaps I know what you mean, Mr. Neff.
You want to knock him off, don't you?
That's a horrible thing to say.
What'd you think I was, anyway? The guy that walks into a good-looking dame's front parlor and says, "Good afternoon, I sell accident insurance on husbands." You got one that's been around too long, one you'd like to turn into a little hard cash? Just give me a smile and I'll help you collect? Boy, what a dope you must think I am.
I think you're rotten.
I think you're swell, so long as I'm not your husband.
Another misconception of classic noir that Double Indemnity subverts is the omnipresent moody jazz that over the intervening decades has settled into a kind of unofficial status as the soundtrack of film noir. In actuality, noir films, particularly earlier examples like Double Indemnity, rarely if ever featured anything but blaring orchestral movie scores. Now later in the lifespan of the formula that would change, exemplified by the swing jazz of my personal favorite The Big Combo, or the whimsical folk guitar of Orson Welles' Euro Noir The Third Man. But for now, in the vast majority of classic period film noir, big band jazz soundtracks are a massive misnomer. But one area where Double Indemnity both embraced and pioneered film noir genre conventions was with the jaw-dropping John Seitz cinematography that sizzles across the screen. Seitz would go on to further renown in Sunset Boulevard and The Great Gatsby, but it was here that his reputation was emphatically staked. Though 1940s B-movie pioneer Stranger on the Third Floor is arguably the progenitor of the effect, it was the more successful and expertly applied Double Indemnity that made the now iconic Venetian blinds lateral lighting effect a staple of film noir's visual iconography.
The living room was still stuffy from last night's cigars. The windows were closed and the sunshine coming in through the Venetian blind showed up the dust in the air.
And so it follows that after an avalanche of Academy Award attention would come the avalanche of imitators. Striking, atmospheric, and most importantly, dirt cheap. As you're no doubt well aware, the Venetian blinds lighting effect remains in regular rotation on every scripted TV drama from CSI to Law & Order, and in every feature film with either a noir-loving director or merely a limited lighting budget. Based on the James M. Cain pulp novel of the same name, and inspired by the infamous case of Ruth Snyder, a photo of whose execution in the electric chair effectively created tabloid journalism in a stateside context, it was the gritty realism of the story that appealed to director Billy Wilder, which made his choice of writing partner all the more quizzical. Who can conceivably adapt a pulp pioneer like James M. Cain, whose works are still being adapted to this very day, you ask? Oh, just Raymond Chandler is all. And while on the face of it, Chandler's hard-boiled, tongue-twisting dialogue might seem at odds with Cain's brooding realism in practice, it was a monumental marriage. With Hollywood's Hays production code in full swing and source material that unflinchingly depicted sordid little details like infidelity and patricide, they needed a master of innuendo to stymie the censors. Chandler danced circles around the Stooges.
Mr. Neff, why don't you drop by tomorrow evening around 8:30? He'll be in then.
Who?
My husband. You were anxious to talk to him, weren't you?
Yeah, I was, but I'm sort of getting over the idea.
There's a speed limit in this state, Mr. Neff. 45 miles an hour.
How fast was I going, officer?
I'd say around 90.
Suppose you get down off your motorcycle and give me a ticket.
Suppose I let you off with a warning this time.
Suppose it doesn't take.
Suppose I have to whack you over the knuckles.
Suppose I bust out crying and put my head on your shoulder.
Suppose you try putting it on my husband's shoulder.
That tears it. 8:30 tomorrow evening, then.
That's what I suggested.
Will you be here, too?
I guess so. I usually am.
Same chair, same perfume, same anklet?
I wonder if I know what you mean.
I wonder if you wonder.
The dialogue makes this film, but it didn't come easy. A habitual drinker, Ray Chandler's early-to-bed, late-to-rise shenanigans and vocal reproval of Wilder's famed womanizing ways put the two at near constant odds to the point of violent outbursts, with many an object obliterated against the Paramount writer's room wall.
Keine Ahnung, ich habe ein Drehbuch geschrieben, no camera movements hat beschrieben. Ja. Die Kamera kommt durch das Schüsselloch rein und sie schnuppert über die Höschen der Dame und dann.
Wollte filmisch sein. Das brauchst du nicht. Das machst du nachher selbst.
The writing sessions became so contentious, in fact, that Wilder's next film, The Lost Weekend, a story of a drunken dildo writer with an undeserved air of self-importance, was effectively a cinematic screed at Raymond Chandler's expense. Chandler, for his part, was no more flattering, saying of Wilder, "He is every kind of writer I detest. Such people are the offal of literature, not because they write about dirty things, but because they do so in a dirty way." Chandler would quit the project over, of all things, the director refusing to draw the Venetian blinds because, in what has to be the peak of pettiness, the writer didn't say please. Though the Wilder-Chandler relationship must not have soured too much, because Chandler's only on-screen role in history was left in the film.
Now get out of here before I throw my desk at you.
I love you, too. I really did, too, you old crab. I was yelling your head off. I was sore at everybody. But you never fooled me with your song and dance.
Either way, the venom and vitriol made for true movie magic, with some of the finest lines in the film not even being audibly uttered, but coming in the form of Walter Neff's cerebral and seminal voiceover narration.
It was a hot afternoon, and I can still remember the smell of honeysuckle all along that street. How could I have known that murder can sometimes smell like honeysuckle?
Contrary to popular mythology, leading man Fred MacMurray was not a last-ditch casting effort in response to the whole of Hollywood passing on the role, but was in actuality the very first choice to play fast-talking insurance salesman-turned-murderer Walter Neff, but promptly turned it down out of concern that his established fan base would consider it too great a departure from his more wholesome, comedic fare to that point.
I let him read the script, and he says, I can't do it. He said, that beautiful line, he says, this requires acting. I says, yes, it will, and you will be wonderful in it. He says, look, for God's sake, I know how to play the saxophone. That's how they found me. And I'm doing those little comedies with Claudette Colbert, and please don't do it to me. I did it to him, he played it, and he was wonderful.
Before scoffing at his reticence, one has to consider that at this point, Fred MacMurray was so clean he squeaked. After launching his career as a singer, he promptly embarked on a decade of dramedies opposite Carole Lombard in the likes of The Princess Comes Across and Swing High, Swing Low. So established was his upstanding, amiable image that he provided the physical blueprint for comic book superhero Captain Marvel, today known as Shazam. After dredging the depths of aspiring and accomplished thespians alike for a suitable replacement and being passed on like a Pauly Shore script, Billy Wilder made one final impassioned plea, and thankfully MacMurray relented at last. And it's a good thing he did. As became the case for much of the principal cast, the success of Double Indemnity would not only court praise from every imaginable strata of Hollywood, but usher in an entirely new era for the veteran actor, a diversity that doubtless prolonged his career by decades. In retrospect, contrary to the modern contention that he was cast against type, it's precisely MacMurray's forthright comportment that works in the film's favor, lending a latent likability to an otherwise irredeemable character. Instead of being repulsed by his guile and glad-handing, we're enthralled by the human underneath and tacitly pining for his redemption.
Get out of here.
You bet I'll get out of here, baby. I'll get out of here, but quick. So I let her have it straight between the eyes. She didn't fool me for a minute, not this time. I knew I had hold of a red-hot poker, and the time to drop it was before it burned my hand off. I stopped at a drive-in for a bottle of beer, the one I had wanted all along. Only I wanted it worse now, to get rid of the sour taste of her iced tea and everything that went with it.
The push-pull relationship between an audience silently rooting for a criminal and the inevitable doom guaranteed by all who infract the law in Hays Code-era film fiction is one of the few inviolable tenets of film noir and guarantees the sordid Double Indemnity as one of its foremost adherents. The characters are doomed from their very first kiss, but they're seemingly predestined to follow their fated course to its grisly conclusion. The omnipresent train and its central focus within the confines of the plot is a tragic visual metaphor that betokens the protagonist's inevitable karmic calamity.
I only wanted him dead.
And I'm the one that fixed it so he was dead. Is that what you're telling me?
And nobody's pulling out. We went into this together and we're coming out at the end together. It's straight down the line for both of us. Remember?
Fred MacMurray's reticence, however, was not shared by the film's leading lady, Barbara Stanwyck, who almost leapt at the chance to expand her dramatic repertoire, albeit with incumbent reservations.
I showed the script to Stanwyck, and she immediately said yes, she wanted to do it because she knew that was a juicy part. She didn't want to play goody-goody part.
When Billy Wilder sent me the script of Double Indemnity and I read it, I had never played an out-and-out killer, and as such, I was a little frightened of it. And when I went back to his office, I said, I love the script and I love you. But I'm a little afraid after all these years of playing heroines to go into an out-and-out cold-blooded killer. And Mr. Wilder, and rightly so, looked at me and he said, well, are you a mouse or an actress?
A performance that Stanwyck turns in for the most part while wearing the tackiest blonde wig known to man, the reasons behind which are nearly as circuitous as the production process itself. Was it intended to convey the latent phoniness of the character, or countervailing reports that it was a last-minute solution when the proper wigmaster made the wrong hairpiece in any way accurate? Whatever the reason, Stanwyck jeteing about like George Washington with a rack does, however, serve the simultaneous function of giving her character a sheetrock-thick air of unbridled artifice, a practiced, icy facade facade that's simultaneously more low rent than a B&B crack house. Edward G. Robinson's scene-stealing turn in a rare protagonist role as the idiosyncratic and meticulous insurance detective Keyes is one of his all-time standout performances, and for a career as decorated as his, that's a statement of profound merit. His soaring Dennis Miller caliber ravings on the inextricable incestuous relationship between life insurance and crime mark many of the film's finest moments.
To me, a claimsman is a surgeon. That desk is an operating table, and those pencils are scalpels and bone chisels. And those papers are not just forms and statistics and claims for compensation. They're alive. They're packed with drama, with twisted hopes and crooked dreams. A claimsman, Walter, is a doctor and a bloodhound and a...
What followed was, by any reasonable metric, movie magic, a film that stands up every bit as well outside of its appointed genre as a centerpiece and a standard bearer for it. A grisly tale of lust, murder, betrayal, and the inevitable karmic plummet to the grave as moralistic as it was unabashedly lurid. Entire movie genres, from splatter films to erotic thrillers, now exist because of the ground this single film was able to break thereafter, with Hayes' office censors going so far as to describe the script of this film as, quote, a blueprint for crime, while simultaneously signing off on it purely on the basis of its heavy-handed moral message. This is film noir of the classic period, mind you, meaning the lawbreakers are doomed from the moment they cross that thin red line. But it's the journey from lawful good to chaotic evil, and ultimately to the grave, that make Double Indemnity an almost hypnotically entertaining experience. More than perhaps any other film noir in existence, if I'm flipping through channels and happen upon even one scene of this film, I'm almost biologically predisposed to sit and watch to the downbeat denouement. A conclusion I'd note was even darker at an earlier stage of production, which, spoiler alert, features Walter Neff being hauled off to the gas chamber with Keyes looking on as justice finds the friend that ultimately betrayed him.
Like in Double Indemnity, I had an ending where Mr. MacMurray was executed in the gas chamber.
Die haben diese Gaskammer,
Ja.
wo man hineinsehen kann von allen Seiten.
Ja.
Zwei Stühle, nicht nur eine, zwei, fast wie eine Doppel. Falls die Zwillinge da töten.
What sets Double Indemnity wholly apart from its crime-ridden contemporaries, however, is how praised it actually was at release. The vast majority of pictures in the aforementioned genre, however highly regarded they are today, were seen at their time as little more than B pictures, quickies cranked out on the cheap while the real stars were off giving a .30 caliber hello to Hitler, hence the influx of leading men who, prior to the conflagration in the Pacific, would have been relegated to best friend or New York cabbie number 5, men too wizened or diminutive to make the cut under normal circumstances. It's inconceivable today to think of Humphrey Bogart or Alan Ladd as anything other than box office bankables. Prior to 30s and 40s, however, they were best friend fodder of the lowest possible order.
I think World War II changed how we saw movies in many ways. Bogart could not have been a hero before World War II. The country was really more sophisticated and willing to accept a different kind of reality than they had before the war. Everyone grew up in World War II, and there was everything from existentialism to film noir that would really say there was a dark side out there.
Double Indemnity stands apart in that context as well as one of the fair few exemplars of a bigger budget blood and guts picture. Many of the tenets of classic noir, sparse sets with striking single light sources and long shadows, omnipresent fog, were in fact instruments of utility. Early noir films, mind you, were again B pictures. They were lit low to hide equally low production value.
I think the film noir filmmakers were really filmmakers for B films. And if you look back at the history of Hollywood, in the 40s and 50s, huge numbers of films were being made. And they were made either with large budgets, A category films, or small budgets, and those were the B films. These films were largely made to fill the lower part of a double bill in order to have a long evening's entertainment at the theater. So they were, in a strange way, a creation of the distribution system in America.
But in Double Indemnity, they were an outright choice, and those choices changed in industry. Ever since knowledge of my noir obsession was made public, I've been asked on the regular to recommend a good starting place for film noir neophytes. We'll settle in scabs and screws, light up a cig, pour a shot of Kentucky bourbon, and dive deep into Double Indemnity. Dig? Until the vaults of the Film Noirchives fling open once more, I'm Razor Fist. Don't get captured.
Whether it's love or hate doesn't matter. They can't keep away from each other. They may think it's twice as safe because there are two of them. But it isn't twice as safe. It's 10 times twice as dangerous. They've committed a murder. And it's not like taking a trolley ride together where they can get off at different stops. They're stuck with each other and they've got to ride all the way to the end of the line. And it's a one-way trip and the last stop is the cemetery.